today with Scientists Warning Europe to talk about action. I'd like to start, as we always do, by thanking all the people that have enabled us to get here before we get into what we're talking about. And that is, we have the power to enable us to make a film and to help us with the paper, SOS Planet, the Charities Aid Foundation, Earthsong, the Alliance of World Scientists, and also for helping us get here at COP26, Sustainable Population Australia, Integrated Centre for Sustainable Development, the International Society for Ecological Economics, Facing Future Earth, and the Tzu Chi Foundation. Now we're here particularly today because we're launching a new film. There was the World Scientists Warnings into Action paper that was already produced and brought out, and a film has now been brought out by Jonathan Clay, the director of the last David Attenborough and Johan Rockström film on Netflix, and today is the day that we launch it. Anybody that would want to see it at home, you can immediately go to scientistswarningfilm.com, that's scientistswarningfilm.com, and you can see it immediately. The paper that we're celebrating through the film is the fourth great scientist warning to humanity, the World Scientists Warnings into Action. And that you can find on planetincrisis.com, and any scientist, any graduate scientist around the world can go there and sign the paper. Already 2,500 scientists from around the world have signed it, and in fact the paper itself was officially published this morning. Now the World Scientists Warning into Action paper goes through 6 main stresses as to the last 2 great warnings, and that is nature, food, economy, energy, population, and pollutants. And it looks at them and looks at levels of leadership required with actions for levels of leadership all around the world, starting at community and parish level, moving up through local authorities, counties and states to national level, and at COP26 and what we need from our international leaders. Now, we are here to sort out the starting of the film. We want to thank Jonathan Clay, the main director, but also Lina Kabaj, who was the assistant director on the film. And we'd also like to then thank all of the production team that are doing it. Many of them work for free, giving their time. So here it is, it's a short film, and we'll be talking more about leadership afterwards.
I wish I knew much earlier on. If I had known, when I came into it, I was just like, yeah, we're going to change all this. We're going to stop Africa. We're going to make sure that this environmental agency stops allowing chemical facilities to pollute in lower income Black and Latino neighborhoods. And then realizing like, oh, people have been actually working on that for decades. I'm just new to the game.
I've been longing for seeing scientists get their hands dirty, get into the crux of the matter, and they'll get into the eye of the storm.
We are not yet able, as a scientific community, to help grab our fellow Earthlings by the scruff of the neck and say, come, we're heading into big changes.
I wonder a lot about whether being a scientist is the best thing to do in the times of this urgent environmental crisis.
So it's only immediate, rapid and far-reaching action that's going to keep 1.5 degrees within reach.
For how much longer can you shout louder in more dramatic font? We need to rethink the fundamental assumptions of what we're doing.
These times are going to call on us to be the best people that we can be.
We have to translate our outrage, our fears, our anxieties, our grief about what's happening into action.
I myself have realized how hard it is, even for one person that gets into government and wants to pursue a transformative agenda to do so alone.
It's really, really important, I think, that we support each other to take political action.
If you want to take climate action, you can. You don't have to be perfect. The world isn't on my shoulders. It's not on your shoulders. It's all of us together.
We understand enough. We understand that the overall problem is fundamentally political. They're fundamentally about people, they're about our institutions, they're about our governance.
It's time to stand together to face down corruption and vested interests.
We need to let go of things we've gotten so accustomed to, so familiar, so dependent on for a long time, including not just habits and behaviors, but ways of thinking.
Visionary leadership doesn't come out of the sky. It needs to be team play at its best.
Changing the time horizons upon which we make decisions is really a big and important part of this. Yes, scientists are critical to this equation, but so is everybody else.
It's like a two-way process. I have to listen to lots of people because there are lots of things I don't know.
I used to think that things would just happen, maybe by magic, but you make the change happen by walking the talk.
For many years I felt that I was just saying, the world doesn't have to be this way, we can change it. Only in the last 5 years I've felt that we can say, we are changing it.
Together we can and must succeed.
You are the people who can make the difference. Be courageous.
Do all we can.
The choice is in our hands.
Great. Thank you very much. And the film there is talking about what needs to be done, not by the scientists. The science is clear, and we're talking about what needs to be done by the political decision makers and all of the other leaders around us. And directly before COP, 2 days before, Scientists Warning issued a letter to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and to Prime Minister Mario Draghi as the hosts of the COP. And we issued this letter asking them for bold action. It was signed by 28 of the world's top climate scientists and other experts, including Dr. James Hansen in America and Sir David King in the UK. And the only bit of science in it is it says that the only target is 2030 for carbon zero, or as soon as possible. 2050 is not the target. It will never keep us safe and ensure survival on the planet. We issued this to these two great leaders, and we hope that they're taking notice of it now as we come to the end of COP26. Now, we now have statements from a number of the scientists that have been involved with us at different stages. Some are authors of the paper, some are signatories of the letter, some are both. And we're going to hear from them now before we move on to talk to our two guests here. So Dr. Victoria Herth here on my right, and Dr. Paul Behrens here on my left. So here are the statements from scientists abroad. And we're starting with Kevin Anderson, who is a signatory of the letter.
The COP26 text makes clear that policymakers do not seem to understand that climate's only response to the total amount of greenhouse gases we put in the atmosphere, and not to eloquent speeches, to counter the scams, or to short-term politics. If we are to meet our commitments to 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade warming, we need to recognise that we need to stop immediately seeking out any new fossil fuel supply and to phase out existing supply as a matter of urgency, and that this needs to be done with equity at its core.
Now, Phoebe Barnard was one of the two lead authors on the paper. She's also a signatory of the letter and on the board of Scientists Warning Europe.
I'm Phoebe Barnard, and I led the drafting of the World Scientists Warning into Action Local to Global paper. I've worked in science and public policy for 34 years in Southern Africa, national development, biodiversity, and climate change. Science is such an important issue for humanity, but it's only a tiny part of the solution. We scientists need to join together with public policymakers, civil society groups, educators, faith communities, artists, everybody. Time to stand up and help grasp this crossroads of civilization, people. Join us. Thank you.
Professor Chris Rhodes, also an author of the paper and a signatory of the letter.
I'm Chris Rhodes. I co-wrote the energy section of the Scientists Warning into Action paper, and I would particularly like to emphasise the need for better use of energy conservation, retrofitting buildings, insulating them properly, draft busting them, and also relocalisation, reconfiguring towns and cities so we can do more of what we do on a local level and cut back on our use of transportation fuel. We could probably cut our energy use by 50% by such means.
Now we have Professor Bill Newman. Professor Bill Newman was also one of the lead authors on the paper, and again, signatory of the letter.
The failure to slow and reverse climate change has committed the next 40 generations to rising sea level. But there is still an opportunity to slow and reverse the frequency and intensity of storms, heat waves, wildfires, and other climate-related disasters. We can no longer wait for laggard governments before acting. Let us join with willing governments as citizens, corporations, cities, and states to act now. Growing our existing forests, improving energy efficiency, and utilizing zero-carbon technologies are the least costly and most effective means to avoid dangerous human interference with the climate system.
Professor Stefano Tebaldi was a signatory of the letter and is based in Italy, so it was very relevant with several other of the signatories that came from Italy.
International politics and decision makers must be more courageous and more generous. The international community must take binding commitments to eliminate all coal-based power plants, not only the particularly dirty ones, and to eliminate all subsidies to fossil fuels, not only those with the so-called inefficient ones. Otherwise, we won't be going anywhere other than towards climatic disaster. And we need to put on the table more economic resources to support the transition in poorer countries. We must recognize that rich countries are the main producers of greenhouse gas emissions and have a moral obligation to compensate poorer countries which suffer the most climate change and do not have sufficient resources to manage the transition.
Philip Webber, Professor Chris Rapley, and again, Chris was actually an author of the paper and a signatory of the letter as well.
The climate and nature emergencies are happening now. To tackle them, we need to transform the way we power, finance, and govern the modern world. Actions drive beliefs and accelerating action. That's why the New World Scientist Warning Paper lays out a roadmap of progress from local to global. I'm hoping that the impotence of the political world, so evident at COP26, will trigger a social tipping point that people will rise up, in which case the Scientist Warning Roadmap can be pivotal.
Now, Philip Webber. Philip is actually the head of Scientists for Global Responsibility.
Hello, I'm a scientist and the chairperson of Scientists for Global Responsibility UK. 26 COPs have failed to reduce emissions so far, which just continue to rise. Climate overheating is already causing terrible harm, crippling poorer and smaller states and threatens larger states also. For this COP to be different, there must be binding agreements to stop extracting more fossil fuels now. Promises for 2050 are empty promises, and that's too slow and too late. It would be a gross failure to leave these massive problems for the next generation. So we must have action now. Thank you.
And finally, Professor Stuart Parkinson, who was a signatory of the letter to the two Prime Ministers.
Well, leaders have a lack of ambition when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. If this were a military threat, resources would be found. Instead, we have excuses. During the COP26 negotiations, there have been particular failings. We need a rapid phase out of fossil fuel subsidies. We need an end to fossil fuel exploration. We need to shut out the fossil fuel industry lobbyists. They are no better than tobacco industry lobbyists. We need to count and cut military carbon. We need to curb the high pollution activities of the rich who have caused and continue to cause the overwhelming majority of the problem. This is the least we should be doing.
So thanks to all those scientists, we're now talking about action and the type of leadership that we need to do it. So I'd like to now bring in our two live guests here, and I'm thankful for them to be here supporting us today. So thank you very much, Victoria. So Dr. Victoria, Victoria, could you talk to us then about what types of leadership we're going to need if we're going to get this kind of action that everybody is asking for?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to recognise, and I'm sure people will do, that the level of inertia that is in our current system. We have essentially, as the ultimate governing body, society, enabled most of our national governments to focus in on financial income and balancing the books as the key way to show us that they're doing a good job, which is why GDP has become a metric reported on the news and what everyone looks at. And this reflects the economic system at large, and the idea being that that is a good proxy for our long-term well-being, for the long-term well-being of everybody. And because of that myopia, the ultimate ends of long-term well-being for all, which is the definition of sustainability and sustainable development, have gone unaccounted for, and we have not held accountability to them. And the ultimate means on which that rests have also been out of sight. So that's the situation for leadership that we find ourselves in. So we need to be pushing for leaders to understand that that is where they currently are and that they need to move beyond. And to move beyond in any leadership is about being able to break those current norms. And the breaking norms starts with understanding the norms that you are constrained by. So we all know that we've got the leadership we need. It is brave and vulnerable and purpose-driven because it is anchored to long-term well-being for all. We all know that we have got that when we start to see leaders who put themselves into the shadows to put the purpose first and make decisions that go against their personal best interests or the interests of their party in order to achieve that. This week we saw the death of W.D. Clark, and that is, of course, an example of a leader who took the moment in history that he was given in order to seal his demise and his party's demise for a greater good. So unless we're seeing that happening, then we know that we don't have the leadership we need, and on a more strategic level, we need plans now for what will happen this year and what will happen next year. Because to be honest, those are the only things that matter now. The rest really is just blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. So 2050 is completely ridiculous. I think we all realise that now. The scientists keep telling us, and we've just got to absolutely act and require that our leaders act. On 2030 or something, that's actually going to get us somewhere towards survival. I also am joined as well here with Dr. Paul Barrett, and I think, Paul, if we throw it up to you on the leadership side, and let's think about what's happening today. Victoria set out the types of leadership we need and the sort of moral fibre that's required to do it. What should we want to get from our leaders at COP26?
Well, from COP26, we really need to see an acknowledgement of the failure of developed countries to provide climate finance for the developing countries around the world. It will be 2023 until we get the 100 billion. That 100 billion is actually really poorly defined anyway. It lumps together loans, grants and investments. Some estimates by Oxfam could place the actual amount of grants as only 22 billion in 2017. We need to see a increased frequency of the ratchets, the announcements of the NDCs. That would be incredibly important, and that would also keep pace with the changing climate that we're actually also seeing. It's worthwhile mentioning that whilst the assessments of temperature have been very accurate, there has been a broad underestimation of the large-scale energy changes on the planet and what the implications of that are on all of the food systems that support us, food and water systems that support us. So when we're talking about the leadership, we absolutely need to see those two first steps. We obviously need to see announcements for 1.5 degrees in terms of the targets. Now it's understandable that perhaps the policies to actually make it all the way down to 1.5 degrees come afterwards, when countries go back to their constituencies and then start to talk about what policies they need to get there. But as Edison and Victoria's been saying, we absolutely need to have that 1.5 degrees. And in terms of the leadership, just to follow on from what Victoria was saying about personal best interest, it is worthwhile remembering that the vast majority of emissions are from the richest 10% of the population. And so we need leaders to actually listen to their constituencies. If you actually talk to the public about what they want, they are far beyond where the politics is at. We've had publics around the world talking about frequent flyer levies, banning SUVs, reducing meat, all sorts of different things that nobody is talking openly about at the highest political levels in different countries. So leadership is really about understanding that the population are far beyond where the current narrative is. They may be surprised by that, but things are shifting very, very quickly, and it's being ahead of that social tipping point so that you can actually harness it for the good, rather than dragging your feet and not So, yeah, a few things that we could see in the next couple of days or so.
A brilliant way of putting it, actually. The social tipping point is what we're absolutely looking for. I'm going to come to both of our speakers again straight away afterwards for about a minute to, if you could personally express your frustration or anger or whatever it would be about the process and perhaps the fact you've been talking about it all the time. But I just want to read out a passage actually from the letter that was written to the two Prime Ministers. In this letter, we avoid stating the latest facts to you, scientific facts to you again. What's the point? The scientific world has researched and reported, peer-reviewed and presented, report after report after report. Most scientists are quite frankly fed up. The dire facts have all been presented, re-presented, re-examined, time and again. Now it is the 12th hour, a minute before midnight. Now is the time for moral courage and real leadership. Now, I don't know how that makes you feel, Victoria, but I wondered if you would like to add a few words to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my journey in 2002, Joburg Summit, and as the first guest on the video expresses, you know, this is not, I was late to the party. We knew about this, and to be able to look populations and young children in the eyes and say, you know, what did we do? It's absolutely a shocking failure of leadership. When I hear leaders like Biden say, hang on, but it's going to take time, you know, let's not rush it, it's complicated. And we've been saying that every single year. It's frankly unacceptable to the largest possible degree, especially when we know it will take, even in financial terms, a fraction of GDP, and we also know, as was very clearly expressed, that the society wants this. So what is stopping the progress we need? And I can only imagine that it must be immediate self-interest, because I don't think anything else makes sense. And to be honest, this is the future of humanity, and for immediate self-interest of a few people and their friends to take down humanity's future and our long-term well-being, yeah, it's frankly shocking, and we shouldn't let it happen.
Paul.
Yeah, I would say that these people aren't engaging in the emotions of the situation. Maybe they can convince themselves through policy documents, through the colours on scientific reports, through sort of the terminology that's washed of the emotion that's actually happening as a result of these changes in the planet. And I don't think that they've actually been hit in the gut yet with the sensation that I think a lot of us in the room have gone through. And so when I see the delays, the lack of appreciation of these impacts, it makes me very sad. But I do have hope that the citizens' assemblies, that the citizens' actions can actually push governments to actually feel that emotional connection. Because I think once you have that emotional connection, it's worthwhile doing absolutely everything that you can possible. And if you're going to have people who are without shame, frankly, if you look at politicians who are taking private jets to go have dinners after leaving COP, for example, then you know we need to vote them out, and they should have shame. So that's what we need to see. We need to see politicians actually engaging emotionally with what this means, and what this means for the future of them, for the future of their children. This is coming fast, and they need to take leadership.
Thanks, Paul. I'm really angry. You know, I spend all my time talking to scientists, and I'm really, really late to the party, but I'm so angry that we keep coming back to it again and again and again. I'm angry that I went through in July 2019 an ecological conversion that shook me to the core. I'm really angry that it happened to me and that anybody let it get to that situation. I mean, I actually had a nightmare where I saw my children, who are 10 and 12 now, turning up to my house at the age of 30. They were knocking on the door, and then they came and they dropped their army bags down into the hall. And in their green khakis, they come in to find me in the living room having a coffee. And they say to me they've just come back from Europe, where they've been shooting people to stop them getting the drinking water. And they tell me that the people they're shooting are poor people who want the drinking water. And they're not getting killed because they've got all the kit, the flak jackets, and they've got bigger guns. But they could get killed, and they're shooting poor people with smaller guns. And they say to me in my nightmare that they're doing that to keep us in Britain living in the luxury lifestyle we've always liked. And they say to me, so you knew about this, didn't you, Papa, 20 years ago? And what did you do about it? And I woke up with tears coming down my face, and I was saying, mouthing the words, but I had a mortgage, and I had to look after you, and I had a job. Was just not good enough, is it? And it's just not good enough with our leaders either. I was unfortunate enough to be at an event only a couple of days ago where I put it to a bunch of politicians sitting there from different countries, and I said to them, look, 2050 is not going to work. All the scientists say that, and we have to act now. We have to do the bigger stuff now for the survival of humanity. And the first answer from one of those politicians, which was brutally honest, I have to say, and she said, look, no politician's going to do it, because if they take targets like 2030, they won't be elected at the next election. Right, well, it's a different kind of leadership we need now. We need a leader, and it doesn't matter whether it's community level, or at mid-state, city level, or at national level, that actually says it's the right thing to do. I've been told by the doctor I'm sick, and I've got to change my behaviour. In this case, I've been told by thousands of scientists. There are tens of thousands who signed the 4 great warnings, and they have told us there isn't time. They've told us we've got to act now. They've told us that the time we need to get to carbon zero is getting sooner and sooner, not further away. We have to do it now. And what those leaders have got to do is they've got to say, right, I believe the science. I know I've got to do it now. It's morally the right thing to do, but ridiculously, it's not just the morally right thing to do, it's about survival. So if we want to survive on the planet, and even our kids, or even we in the room here, want to have a planet that we can live on properly, we need to take the action now. So those leaders have got to say, I don't care about what polls might show. I've got to do the right thing, but then I'm going to take everybody with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to my community, to my country, and I'm going to explain why I'm doing this. Because I have to do it. Because we have to go first. Because we can't wait for every other country to do it, or every other city to do it. We have to get out from the blocks and show people how to do it. But we need that leadership at individual level, community level, parish, city, all of those levels, and we need these leaders now. We can't wait for them anymore. So we've got to get out the blocks and get on with it. Now, I've said it before in some of these press conferences, but I think the analogy still works. You know, we're running a marathon, okay? We want to break the world record. In fact, everybody wants to break the world record in a marathon, and it's going to be a tough race. And we're all out running a marathon, okay? And there's a big group of runners at the front, and halfway through, they're all competitive, but they're well off the pace. They're off the pace because they're looking at 2050, and what we need to do is to get onto that world record pace and get there by 2030. So we need a real leader. 1 or 2 real leaders to break from the front and go for it. And they might not make it, but if they do make it, they're going to save us. And if they don't make it, they've had a really good try, and they've done the sort of stuff that we all need to inspire us at every other level to follow them. And if they go for it, other leaders will come with them as well. And that's what we need at COP. 30% methane reductions by 2030? Rubbish! Give us 100%. Give us what we need and allow us to survive on the planet, and show us why you're elected as a leader and move us forward. Thank you for coming.